Yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. Dueling card games seem to be very popular with gamers, whether playing with the physical copy of the game or online. I'm no exception, as I really enjoy two-player competitive card games. In fact, my last review was based around just that, and I much prefer the physical copy. However, my tendencies lie in card games complete and playable out of the box. I enjoy deck builders and living card games where all players have the same confined boundaries, where your success is mostly based around your initial or in-game construction and strategy, and I'm happy to buy expansions for these. I've dabbled in Magic the Gathering, but never really set a foundation. I borrowed a friend's deck, played it, and had a great time, but the concept of this never-ending cycle of purchase and construction didn't click with me, even though the game is hugely popular. Therefore, I was intrigued by Solforge Fusion from Stoneblade Entertainment, as this card game has been designed by the creators of both Magic the Gathering, a collectible card game, and Ascension, a deck building game. In Solforge Fusion, you represent a mighty and powerful Forgeborn, where you must play creatures, minions and spells in the form of cards to whittle your opponent's health to zero in order to win the game. I know what you're thinking, sounds familiar, but the game features a lane system for card placement and attacking, a levelling up mechanic to develop your deck throughout the game, and an evolution in trading card games with the ability to fuse decks, or so it boasts. But what does this mean for gameplay? Firstly, you use pre-constructed decks, and this starter set comprises one deck from each of the 4 factions available. These decks are generated using various algorithms so that every single deck created is unique. No two are the same. Yes, this sounds just like Keyforge, which is not a coincidence, as these games also share the same designer, Richard Garfield. Whereas in Keyforge, you got given one unique mathematically generated deck to use, in Solforge, you instead choose a pre-constructed deck from 2 different factions and fuse them, which is a posh way of saying shuffle together. Therefore, not only do you get to select 2 decks, you also have some control over how your deck will play based on this selection. Let's take a look. There are 4 different factions in Solforge, and the game comes with one deck from each of those. Now, it's unclear from the contents within the box, but each faction is associated with various traits and themes. The Necreum are your undead or necromancer type of faction with zombies and monsters, but the Aloyan utilise mechs and robots as well as giant war machines. The Utera utilise nature, forest creatures and spirits to their advantage, and the Tempests use the elements, but my deck appeared to be mostly made up of dinosaur-like creatures. Each of these decks will include an avatar or a Forgeborn, and these sit separately from your deck during play. And there are likely many versions of your Forgeborn cards, all with different abilities. As you can see, each deck is quite small, only 30 cards, and these are split into 3 levels, each containing 10 cards. So, at level 1 we have 10 different cards consisting of creatures and spells. The level 2 cards consist of the exact same 10 cards, but are more powerful with greater health and attack values, as well as better abilities. Likewise, the 10 level 3 cards are just better versions of the cards found in level 2. At setup, each player will choose 2 decks to play with, and the cards must come from different factions for each player, so I couldn't take 2 Necreum decks for example. For the enigmatic fusion to occur, what you need to do is separate your deck into 3 levels and then shuffle the level 1 cards together. This becomes your starting deck, and the remaining level 2 and 3 cards are then set aside, for now. Each faction in this starter set also comes with a small set of minion cards that don't start in your deck, and these are brought into the game by the abilities of creatures or your Forgeborn, and these cards have a different minion on each side. So I never got on with Keyforge. I didn't like the theme or really like the premise of the game. However, in Solforge, I like the idea of blending these decks together and the fact you have a number of options in just this starter set. It's quirky and I can see the appeal. However, the cards don't seem to have any faction icon for identification, only a little artwork and colouring that matches your Forgeborn card in some way. But the back of the Forgeborn card has a list of what cards belong to its deck, so they shouldn't get misplaced. The art is nice, better on some cards than others, and card abilities and stats are easy to identify, as we'll see in a bit. Each player gets a colourful playmat. These are okay, but being made of paper means they'll get creased easily, so it's unlikely they'll stay in good condition for long, although there are premium versions available. The starter game doesn't come with any lore or a rulebook, which is frustrating, so you don't really have any idea about the theme, the factions, or why they're fighting and fusing abilities. Instead, you need to read this online. The rules are fairly simple, spread out over 2 tabs with a glossary and appendix on the third, but I prefer a physical copy of the rules rather than having a digital version. If you don't mind that, then you'll be okay, and the website also has areas to track and claim your decks where you'll need to create an account. The game is played over 4 rounds where players take turns playing cards, activating abilities and battling creatures in an attempt to reduce the opponent's Forgeborn health to 0. On a turn, you get to play 1 card or level up a card, then the opponent does the same. After you've both carried out this action twice, the phase culminates in a combat section and then a maintenance phase. After this has occurred 3 times, there is a deck cycle phase where you introduce new cards into your deck and your Forgeborn grows more powerful, and this becomes the end of the round where you then follow out the same process of playing cards and leveling up. Let's take a look. At the beginning of the game, you only have access to your level 1 cards and you start the game with 5 cards in hand. These cards are free to play, meaning you don't have to spend any form of resources to get them onto the table. Creature cards are played from hand into any one of 5 lanes which have a front and a back area. If you are the Forge player, represented by this card, which essentially is the first player, all your cards must be placed in the front area of the lane you choose. The other player must place their cards in the back area of the lanes, and each lane of any one player map can only hold 1 card. Another type of card you can play is a spell that has an immediate effect, like increasing the stats of cards in play or bringing in one of your minions. Once activated, these cards are then banished, which essentially means removing them from the game. Now, once you've placed your creature card into a lane or played a spell, you then need to find the same card in the set-aside higher level decks and place it in your discard pile. So, as I played a level 1 card, I then need to find the associated level 2 card that was in the upgrade area, and this will expand my deck later. There are also free actions you can take that include activating abilities on creature cards in play by exhausting them, and these can move your creatures to different lanes or cause damage and destroy cards to alter combat stats or bring minions in, for example. Combat is fairly straightforward. Firstly, this only occurs where there is a creature card in the front row of a lane. If an opponent's creature is in any position in the lane opposite, then both deal damage at the same time that can result in elimination and banishment or a reduction in health. If there is no opposing creature, then the attack value goes directly to the Forgeborn. If one or both cards are in the back area, then there is no combat for those lanes, and you carry out this process for each lane with a creature card. During the deck cycle phase, players then get to reshuffle their decks, adding in any higher level cards that they gained during that round. Therefore, your deck essentially levels up, becoming more powerful for the next round. From this, in the next round, you'll then be looking to play cards at a higher level that in turn allows you to search for the level 3 version that will also become part of your deck. So you may think you'll want to select carefully which card to play based on what abilities the higher level card may bring to your deck later in the game, or for what a particular card can do for you right at that moment. For me, it's probably the latter. You get options of where to place creatures to either block an opponent's attack to your Forgeborn, take out a menacing enemy, or perhaps it supports a card's ability. The combat mechanic is simplistic and quick, basically comparing value against health, and this happens at the same time. Being the Forge player allows you some advantage as you get to place creatures in the front area of a lane, but this role changes over time. Some abilities of creatures are aggressive or defensive, allowing you to ignore placement rules. Others have shields that absorb damage, and if they have stealth, the creature can bypass the enemy in the back area of a lane to attack the Forgeborn, which is pretty cool. I like the upgrade system here, where your deck essentially levels up and becomes more powerful as the game progresses. However, your level 1 cards can follow you into later rounds, so you may need to seek ways to banish them by playing spells, replacing them in lanes with higher level cards, or choosing a level up action that removes a card from your hand to place its higher level in the upgrade area. There is nothing worse than, say, in round 2, drawing your first hand of cards to all be level 1, whilst your opponent flashes some robust creatures and spells. Also, each time there is a deck cycle, your Forgeborn will upgrade. During the first round, they are hapless and have no abilities. but in later rounds they develop some nice tools and can be activated for free, and these will evolve as the game develops. As you are fusing two faction decks at setup, you also get to choose which of the Forgeborn to take into battle. The game is quick, being played out over 4 rounds, so expect to finish in 30 minutes or so. Most of the game mechanics are not revolutionary, demonstrating a standard format to combat and card activation, but it's the upgrading system that I like. If you use the same decks between games, they will build slightly differently each time depending on which cards you played, when, and even which Forgeborn you selected to some extent. So here I can see the appeal. However, it can be frustrating to try and remember to pull out the required higher level cards from the correct deck each and every time you play a creature or a spell. It's a novelty at first, but wait until you forget to do this a couple of times and then come back and see me. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the game comes with no rules. Not a massive problem, just a preference for me. But one thing does stick out. There are no markers to record damage and the starting 50 health of your Forgeborn. This is somewhat true for the health and attack values of the creatures in play, although the game does come with some small dials indicating a plus or minus modifier, which are clunky to use. Tokens would obscure the cards, and too many dice can become awkward in my opinion. A simple rotating dial or a separate tracker card for the Forgeborn would be appropriate, but I guess pen and paper would work too. Overall, it may have been best to perhaps include 2 smaller but thin card player mats, just showing the lanes where the decks can be arranged around the edges, a player health tracker and a few dice. I don't know. Regardless, the game is enjoyable with an interesting theme. Choosing factions and seeing how they combine is exciting, and I like the way minions can be brought from your play area to the board as a free action. Some are quite nasty creatures, and one, the Wisp, is very weak but replaces the enemy creature, meaning if played right, you'll have less damage to face during combat. At setup, allowing you to select cards from 2 factions permits some control over your deck, but I don't think there's enough in the starter game to see massive benefits. It just gives variability, which is always welcome. The game is clearly aimed at organised events due to its fairly quick playtime, but I'm unsure if there are any banned faction decks, as I understand this did occur with Keyforge. Will I buy additional decks? Maybe, as I want to see how cards differ among the same factions. Was the game fun? Yes, but not groundbreaking, as I wasn't completely blown away by what was offered, but it does get a nod from me. As always, let me know in the comments what you think about Solforge Fusion, whether as a home game or for organised play. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. This is Ninja Geek Games. Cheers.